Okay, well, it's 10:02, so I'm going to get started. And this is a WSU OSU Tree Fruit Extension webinar. And my name is Ashley Thompson. I am the Extension Tree Fruit Horticulturalist for Wasco and Hood River counties. And usually I have Matt Whiting of WSU and Bernardita Salato of WSU here with me as well. They were unable to make it today. And today we have with us Dr. Dave Brown. He is the director of AgWeatherNet, and he's here to talk about the new AgWeatherNet on-farm web and mobile app decision support platform. So we're really excited to have him here today. I think this information is going to apply to a lot of folks in Washington, Oregon, and also Idaho. So most of you are probably Zoom masters by now. This far into 2020, you've done a lot of Zoom meetings, but we're going to go over just how a webinar works in case some of you haven't been on a webinar before. So as an attendee, I have you all muted right now. I can unmute you, and you can also raise your hand if you have a question or you need something from me. You can also send messages in the chat box to others in the meeting. And you can see that bar at the bottom of your screen. It has chat, raise hand, Q&A. You can use those buttons to do any of those functions. You can raise your hand if you need something for the host or the speaker to get their attention. I'm not, a tech person, so if you're having technical difficulties, I'll do my best. But the most important thing is that if you have a question, please type it into the Q&A box. This is really important. If you type it into the chat box or you just raise your hand, it might get lost. So please type it into the Q&A box. If I do see that you've written it in the chat box, I'll ask you to please copy and paste it into the Q&A box. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to Dave so that we can get started. Dave, can you share your screen? Is it letting you do that?
It says it's disabled. You have to give me permission.
Okay. Okay, Dave, you are now the host, so you should be.
Here we go. Here we go. Let's share. Here we go. So, all right. So first of all, I just want to thank everyone for attending this. I'll be introducing this platform, and we'll be over time developing other materials to help get people started on this. This is meant to be sort of the first introduction. But this is where we're going. This is going to be our platform going forward. We're going to be gradually migrating all of the different decision support we have onto this platform. We'll continue to maintain our website as a place, where you can see what's happening with weather stations and maps where they're located and things and general program information. But this is where the decision support is going to be. And this platform is part of a change we've made where we're migrating to a 3-tier system in which we have sort of the gold standard stations. We have a fairly large number of more affordable stations, and then we have private stations that people can install, and we'll put those on our network. So our overall mission is to provide high quality site-specific weather data and forecast for effective agricultural decision support. We are very much a meteorology shop. We have at this point now, I guess, 5 meteorologists. And we're doing a lot of work on how to provide improved forecasts, specifically forecasts that are tuned to what growers need, and making those as specific as possible, as well as weather data as site specific as possible. So the overall objectives of this platform are, one, we want to be site and unit specific, so that you can, if you're managing by unit, you can have all the tools run for each unit in a fairly seamless way. And then we'll talk a little bit about the site specific in terms of the weather data that might go into that. Crop specific. So one thing that can happen is a website can get kind of cluttered. And so the way this works is if you're growing cherries, you're only going to see the cherry tools. If you're growing grapes, you only see the grape tools. And so we can provide a platform that works for a wide range of crops and yet not have it be too cluttered. It's meant to be integrated. What we heard from our stakeholders is they want all the, if there's like 4 numbers they need to make decisions, they kind of all want it in one place, and therefore concise and mobile. So they want that in the palm of their hands. And we're going to talk about how we're going to get there. We're not entirely there, but we're working in that direction. So the tier 3 overview, I just want to hit this. This is on our website. If you want to put in a private station, this platform is designed to handle that. So you can put in a private station. If you don't want a full station, you can put in a temperature RH sensor in an orchard block, and we can pull that as well. And you can see all the details if you go to our website on that. But this platform is designed with this sort of thing in mind. And I'll just pause here and just mention that if there's any questions at any point, don't hold the questions to the end. Shoot your questions to Ashley, and I'll ask her to interrupt me. I'll try and pause, and if I forget to pause, Ashley, just interrupt me, and I'll try to answer questions as we go. Okay, so, but the basic way this platform works is you've got an organization, which might be, say, Zirkle Fruit. That's your company. You've got a bunch of different sites. These are your orchard, your vineyard, and these are things that you sort of manage as a location. And it's up to you to decide what a site is and how to define it. And then you've got what we're calling microclimates. So within a given orchard, maybe that whole orchard you treat it as one in terms of the weather. You think there's basically, it's all pretty similar. Maybe you want to break it out. There's a high part and a low part, or maybe you put in sensors. So that's something to think about. Now, when we'll get into how you do this later on, but when you're deciding how to break your orchard out or your vineyard into microclimates, you have to think about where the data is going to come from. And we're certainly working on ways of interpolating, but if you don't want to break an orchard into like 7 microclimates if you're not collecting any data on the differences between those areas. So think about what kind of data you're going to collect when you break out the microclimates for unit. And we'll talk again about this more in a practical matter later. And then last of all is the block, and that's your management unit. That's where you've got different crops, different cultivars, and that's where essentially the information we need for the models is derived from. And I will also just point out that this site-specific forecasting is something that's an active area of research. You know, how do we best provide a forecast at a given location, given our network? We have a really robust network. How do we utilize that to really improve the weather data at a particular location? So that's sort of the high level overview. Now, one thing I'll point out is that right now, when you actually go to set things up, the microclimate will be designated in the units. We're actually going to break that out, and hopefully that'll be next week. We didn't want to make a major change right before our webinar and break something, but this will be broken out so that you will actually specify these in a separate sort of layer. It'll make it a little more intuitive. Right now, you designate it in the units themselves, but any units that have the same designated stations you're drawing from and any offsets, we will migrate that into this new kind of structure if you've already done that. All right, so with that broad overview, the other thing to point out is that we really are heavily focused on the mobile side of things, but to make the mobile more sort of portable and easy to use, all of the organizational side of things have to be done on the web first. So you can't really use the mobile tool if you haven't first set up your organization on the web. In the future, we'll have some reporting and seasonal views. Again, that's secondary for us. We're really focused on putting some tools in your hands. And every single tool we have is actually available both on the web and in the mobile version. And we try as best we can to make them as similar as possible. So with that, I'm gonna go to a new share.
We've got 2 questions, Dave, that I think would be good to answer before we move on.
Yep.
So what, if any, assistance can be provided if we want to install T3 systems on site?
Yeah. So if you want assistance putting those on, we won't go to the site, or at least, not generally. There might be a specific case where it aligns with our research and we might help you out. But We can provide you with guidance based on what we can do by looking at Google Earth, by looking at your orchard, by talking with a meteorologist. So what I would recommend is that you do get in contact with a meteorologist. So we have a meteorologist in Prosser, one in Wenatchee, one in Mount Vernon, and depending on where you are, you can just shoot an email into weather@wsu.edu, and we'll route it to the right meteorologist, and they will work with you. And so they'll talk with you, they'll talk about placement issues, they'll talk about any specific concerns or questions you have, and walk you through it. So that much we can do. Yeah.
So the next question is, can people out of state, maybe in New York or Pennsylvania, connect their weather stations to the ANW as tier 3 stations and run AWN models for their sites? Is there any cost for that?
We're not going to make that an option, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is that the models haven't necessarily been calibrated for those regions, but also, again, when I talked about the fact that we're doing all this work on the meteorology, and all of our data layers are for Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, so we can't deliver the weather tools outside of those 3 states, and therefore it doesn't make sense to put in a tier 3 station out there. And it also, there's some things we're developing in terms of quality assurance, that it really helps to be part of a network. So we can look at your neighboring stations, and we build models based on the neighboring stations and how they're performing. That helps us see when something's wrong with your station. So again, if you're in New York or Pennsylvania, we can't really utilize those tools. Sorry.
No, we had another question come in. Is there an API connectivity option to the data?
There will be. So we're working with Synoptic well, we have it right now. Let's put it this way. We have it right now that people can access our station data, and we manage the API ourselves. If someone's asking about the tier 3s, if they put in their own station, then yes, they get free access to their own station data. So if they put in a private station in the orchard, we will give them free access to an API to pull that data. If you're talking about access to other data from our network, then there is a cost to it, and it's actually, but that's all changing, and it's going to a plan with Synoptic, which is a big sort of weather data provider. Anyway, and those that have more questions can ask me, and I'll give you more details. But data is generally going to be available. Yes.
Great, thanks. Oh, here we got another one. Will tier 2 and 1 cost to researchers?
No.
So
I mean, we're talking about Washington researchers. I think we have some caveat in our data policy that is out of state, talk to us. We probably want to collaborate or something. I'll probably need to go back and reread that.
So are there any rough estimates as to the cost of installing the T3 stations on site?
Rough estimates, yes. So the 3 options you have, if you put in an APNIS 41 station, and again, it depends on what additional sensors you have. I mean, it really does, but you're in the ballpark of $2,500 for that. If you put in an APNIS 14, which is just temperature and relative humidity and a leaf wetness sensor and a logger, that's around $1,000. If you do a basic Davis station, it's around $1,600. Again, these are very approximate, but if you start to add on like leaf wetness, then Davis is configured differently. It's kind of a hub node, and so when you add additional sensors, the cost jumps up pretty quickly. So adding soil sensors or leaf wetness then puts you more in the range of a meter APNIS 41 station, in that $2,500 range, depending again on how you configure it. So those are all questions, though, that you can certainly contact. We can route you to a meteorologist, and they can talk you through that, what's involved. And also, I should mention that these all Davis meter, any of these companies, there's a cost to pulling the data. And it's roughly, I think for both of them, it's around $220 a year, something like that, is the cost of pulling the data from the logger.
All right, thank you, Dave. I don't see any more questions coming in.
All right, so I will get on to the platform itself. I'm going to go ahead and share this. So I'm going to start off by just kind of looking at the displays, and then the idea is, and then I'll get into a little bit of how you actually set this up. but it's always more fun to look at the display. So this is, I set up 2 sites for this demonstration. One of them is IREC, the Process Research Station, and one of them is the Wine Science Center in Richland. And what you see here is a mediagram. It's always fun to look at that. And right now, this vertical line, this is now. And so we're looking at Thursday, and then this goes into Friday. Basically, the yellow is daytime and the white is nighttime. So you can kind of see the days showing here. And anything to the right of now is forecast. And right now, that's coming from NOAA. In the future, that will come from our own models. But it's showing cloud cover here up on top. It's showing temperature here. It's showing dew point. And then this is wind. Our wind, just for display purposes, is capped at 20 miles an hour. When it gets above that, you don't see it. And you also notice that we have this tooltip so that, if you want detailed information, you can hover over it. And you can, in fact, turn that, if that annoys you, it tends to annoy me. So I can turn that off, and now it doesn't spit out that data anymore. So this has got temperature, air temperature. And again, I think it's 3 days forward, 3 days back. It's meant to be relatively current. It's got dew point. It's got precip. So you can see these rain events here along the bottom right here. Those are pretty small rain events. Again, that's 0.2 inches up to this first bar. So you can see rain events. You can see the wind speed is the height of this curve I'm tracing right now. And the wind direction is shown with these arrows here. And again, it's a cap, so looks like some high winds coming up this afternoon for this location. So this is the unit name here, and this is whatever name you give it. This is the site name, and again, whatever name you give it here. So this is our sort of basic thing here that goes into a lot of, this data goes into a lot of different tools. And we can see here, the plus tells us there's very high winds forecast for Sunday here at this location. So all the basic meteorology you'll find on this mediagram, and then you can scroll down and see this for every unit. Now, one of the changes that's going to come is if you're just looking at weather data, and it's pulling this up now, and actually it probably slowed down now that I'm on Zoom as well, but if you're just looking at weather data, we'll, instead of showing you for every unit, we'll do it for every microclimate that you define. So it won't show quite as many of these because there's a lot of repetition in here. There's a lot of units that are getting the same weather data, and so you don't really need to see them over and over again. So that'll change. And the other thing I'm going to switch to now, and that's showing, I'm going to switch this to all crops. I didn't realize I had it set to wine, but I'll switch it to all crops now. So this way of introducing, you can select different crops. I'll wait till this pulls up here. And again, I think being on Zoom seems to slow this down. But we can pull up all crops here, and I can filter by cherries only or wine grapes only or other crops. I have another crop on here. I have mint, which isn't defined in our system. And so it goes into the other category for mint. And over time, we can start to define more crops. If you have a crop that is in our system, we can always add it. And this is the weather tool. This is and there's other tools here right now. Right now, we're focused on the cold hardiness. It's winter crops. The other thing that's up here is we can switch to what we call a square view if you want something more compact. And where you really want it more compact is actually when you're looking at, I'm gonna switch first to our snap view. So this is our snap view, and the idea, this is from industry feedback from the first version of this website, is that it's nice to have all the information you need kind of in one place, easy to find. So this is for every unit. This is the name of unit. This is the site. I can load more here. And it's got today's high-low. It's got sort of the current weather conditions, current temperature. It's got wind information. It should have direction. There was a little quirk in the wind direction that came up a couple days ago. It's got precipitation the last 24 hours. It's got current dew point. It's got a 24-hour forecast. So, what kind of precipitation is anticipated in the upcoming highs and lows. It's got a frost forecast. And if, in fact, the forecast temperature for this unit is anticipated to cross the lethal temperature for this unit, then there would be a red warning here that would tell you the time periods over which there might be a problem. And then you probably want to go to the frost forecast tool and see, look at a little more detail of what's going on. So this is the snap view. And the nice thing about the snap view is you have the option here to, by clicking on that button on the upper right here, you decide I don't ever want to see grape cold hardiness, you can turn it off. So all of these things can be turned off and on. This is actually the weather forecast. If you don't want the weather forecast, the weather is always there for the snap tool, but the weather forecast may not be. So that's configurable. And while right now it doesn't make that much difference, I think if we start adding tools, you'll want to definitely, ability to take out the ones you're not interested in. There's a question there. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, there's a question here. Why do you cap the wind speed at 20 miles per hour?
Yeah, we don't actually cap the wind speed at 20 miles. We just cap the display because most of our if you think about the decision making most times, then you're going to at that point know that you've got a problem. You've got high winds essentially. There's always an issue that if you expand the display to show every possible range of values, you're going to have a lot of white space a good deal of the time. And we didn't really want to deal with that, so we decided we'd cap it at 20. But there's something we've actually discussed. We can make the tooltip actually show you the true value. So even though it might only display to 20, if you want to hover over it, you can see the actual forecast wind speed. So we can provide that. All right. So if you have any other questions right now, I will address them.
Any more questions about the tool? Anything you want to go through again that would be helpful?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'll just show you again what happens now. So we have all the crops selected and we're looking at this information for all the crops. You'll notice that if it's a cherry one, there's not two frosts. It only shows you the frost forecast for cherry. If it's wine grape, there's just one frost, it's there. And on the other, no, what in the world? I thought I had an other, and now that, here it is, here's the other. You notice there's no frost forecast because for mint, there's no frost forecast for mint. And so these are smart. They only show what makes sense for what you're growing at that unit. So the next thing I wanted to show you is right now we're showing all crops. I'm going to select cherry cold hardiness. And so now it's pulling. This is actually one of our slower models. This is one of the things we'll need to work on is computing it in a different way so that we cache values so we don't have to recompute it. Because right now it just takes a while to compute that model. And so it's a little bit slow, but it's loading up here. So this will only show you, notice automatically when I select cherry cold hardiness, it automatically filters to cherry units. It's only going to show me the units where I'm growing cherries. It won't show me where I'm growing wine grapes or mint. And this is what it is now. One of the things we're talking about is actually we might just so there's not a lot of information on these plots. And so what we might do is actually take the three lines, the LT10, the LT50, the LT90, and actually just overplot them on top of the mediagram. So you can see those lethal temperatures together with, the wind speeds, the forecast temperature, the dew point, which is also really critical to managing frost. So put all that information together. So that's something that actually will probably come fairly soon because we just looked at this and thought, well, there's not a lot showing. There's a question up here.
Yeah, will the evaporation be added to the weather snap view?
Yes, ET and growing degree days. We'll get to that later. I'll show you what will be added. But yeah, ET will be on there and growing degree days will be on there and everything we do will be on there. Yeah. Yep. So that's that. And then there's also grape cold hardiness as well. And it's loading up. One of the issues we have right now, and you might encounter this, is if you pick a grape cultivar for which we don't have a model, right now it'll say the model's not available. We need to work with Marcus Keller and have sort of a way that you can pick a surrogate if you want to that says for this cultivar, in the model, this is the closest cultivar in terms of how it responds with cold hardiness. the way around that is to, even if you're growing a cultivar, you can change the actual cultivar to something that's modeled, and then it'll show up. You can lie to us. That's fine. It's your choice. So there you go for cold hardiness. There's not much to show. It's not very cold and everything's dormant. It's not very exciting right now. So I think I'm going to just check my notes here, make sure that I've actually mentioned everything I wanted to mention. Showed you square view, horizontal view, cherry cold hardiness, snap
We
view.
got a cherry cold hardiness question here.
Yes.
Can you
yes.
explain the swell, cluster, and bloom at the bottom of the cherry model?
Yes, that's actually a really good question. I'm going to switch back to this. So what we're going to do, and this may not, we may not stick with this over long term, but and we need to put this up here that this is the cherry model is very much a beta model, and it's actually fine during dormancy. It works quite well. But when it doesn't, we're not as confident about it. And so what we're doing is, I chose the wrong one. Sorry. But what we're going to do is this app is actually going to solicit information from growers. So what we want to know from you is, when are you actually seeing bud swell? When are you seeing open cluster? And that can help us with the modeling. So we want to get feedback in two ways. One, it helps us with the general model, but in the future, and we actually had a big proposal that went in, to do just this. In the future, there will be artificial intelligence algorithms that will learn from what everyone sees in their own particular block, their own particular orchard, that will help them tune models to what they're seeing. And so that's the future. So there is an interactive component to this. Right now, of course, none of this is happening, but there will be a green bar kind of going across here. But this first iteration of it, we're largely using this to collect information from the producers to improve our models. As another question popped up.
Yeah, and I've got a question about that. How do you select those things if you're a grower that's using this program? How would you select swell or cluster or bloom?
Well, there'll be a pop-up. There'll be a pop-up that will do it for you. So we'll and when that time comes, we'll probably have at least make a demonstration video, if not a webinar, kind of engaging growers in that process. And Ashley is on that project, so she knows what we're talking about here. So when that time comes, we'll have fine-tuned exactly how we want to manage that engagement. And we'll probably have some training for growers who want to participate, and how we work on that together, and some info, and there'll be pictures showing you what these different stages look like, so we're all kind of on the same page. And we actually have that module is there right now. It's actually coded in already, but we probably want to revisit that with Ashley and some others before we go live with that.
So got two more questions about the cherry models in particular. When you select the stage, does the model change?
Right now, no. In the future, yes. Yeah.
And that's gonna be once you gather that data from the growers. And
we need to know how to use it. We need to learn how to use it. And so we don't want to be real hasty about it. But yes, in the future, there might be, this year, we might do something where we could do kind of like a reset for swelling in particular. So in other words, if the model is really mispredicting the dormancy break, we might do a reset at that point. But we have to be very careful about that. And so I'm reluctant to commit to that right now. Yeah.
Can those stages be predicted by growing degree days and variety? That's another question that came in.
Yes, and that's what we're working on. That's what we're working on, is predicting them from growing degree days. And actually, there's a chill model for the fall, and then there's a growing degree day model for the spring. But optimizing that, we have a team of statisticians that are working on this, and I would say we're not ready to claim any one thing. And this is a project that we're going to need more data over several years. There's a lot of data that's been collected, but it wasn't necessarily collected systematically in a way that we would like to fit a model. And that's why we're going to slap the word beta all over this. and we're going to collect data from you, and we're going to continue collecting data ourselves over a few years. So we have a project that's coming on board in January that's focused on blueberry and cherry frost mitigation, and that will allow us to continue collecting some data for the next 3 years.
So before we move on, does anybody have any other questions pertaining to these models?
There's something just popped up there. I don't know. Is that a different question?
I don't have, oh, one just popped up. Here we go.
Mhm.
Is there a plan to interface the tool with third-party data from out-of-network stations?
Uh, I guess well, I mean, I don't know what out of network means. So I would say in general, no, we would, but we are integrating other networks. So AgWeatherNet is now available through our platform. So all the land reclamation stations, which there's quite a few in Oregon and some in Washington. So that's being integrated, and then we are integrating the Columbia Gorge grower stations, but you have to be a member to access those. We're integrating a group of stations from wine growers down in Idaho. They have their own little network. Again, you have to be part of that network to see those. So our strategy is to integrate. We do want to integrate so that we can manage the data ourselves. So does that sort of answer the question? Or is there follow up? I see two more.
Yeah, there's two more questions. They're not quite follow-up, but are
Okay.
you looking for volunteer cherry farms to participate in data collection and model development?
Yes. Yes. Very much so. Shoot us
So
an email. Yeah.
I was going to say, do you think that's going to be more on this platform, or is that going to be more when my team and Gwen's team goes out and takes a look at cherry buds?
There's going to be both. So we have some, we have a funded research project from the Oregon Sweet Cherry folks, and that, that'll be based out of Ashley's leading one group that's going to do, and also Kelsey is involved in that to do some field work, observing phenology in the field, and we're also doing some chamber measurements of cold hardiness. And then there's a group coming out of Prosser, and so cherries orchards near there, and then also we'll have some people running out of Wenatchee. So we'll have that. So that's going on, and then there's also the participation through the app. Participation through the app, you don't need to contact us. We'll contact you. Everyone's using the app. We'll reach out and say, hey, we're ready to go. Here's some training we want to do, and get you up to speed. Just be on the app and have some cherry units, and you'll hear from us.
So if you are a farmer that's interested and you're in, say, Tri-Cities, how should people reach out to you? Should they email you? Should they email Gwen? Are you going to send out an email recruiting folks?
I think they could go ahead and shoot an email to weather@wsu.edu, and we'll route it to the right person. That's probably the best way to do that. Gwen probably knows some people that she, is planning to work with, but I think for phenology, we need quite a few sites. And so we'll probably, I think we'll be recruiting some folks, some sites to do some observations on.
So are there any plans to use these tools for IPM decision-making?
Yes.
Are we going to go through that maybe later?
Yeah,
in this
later on, we'll talk about it. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yep.
All right. I think we got all the questions answered.
All right. We need to get going. No, but this is good. This is really good. I want questions in the middle rather than stacked up at the end. There's another one that just popped up. Should we answer it now, or should I go? Is it related? Is it follow up to?
The question is, will this have the ability for push notifications either through the app or via text, not only for cold, but also alerts for other models?
Yes. So we're going to talk about this later, but I guess I may as well insert this now, and then later on I'll just pass over it. We have an alert system that's focused on the frost warnings right now, and there's alerts that come out through the app alerts, but there's also, we're putting in, and the growers in Oregon specifically asked for us to provide an ability to call them. So we can call landlines, and that's actually one of the bigger challenges in terms of coding that up. And so what will happen is we'll probably set it so you can get one phone call a night, and then from there on, it's all alerts through the app that tell you, this particular unit might be in trouble. You're below a certain temperature, that kind of thing. But that same alert system, and for example, we already have that. So you don't see it now because it's wintertime, but there's an occupational heat stress tool on here. and that sends out alerts. It says, hey, your workers, the heat conditions are such that today, this afternoon, or whatever, your workers, might need extra protection, extra water, extra whatever. So yeah, we already have that alert system in there, and it would apply for pretty much everything. And as usual, there's options to like turn them off or to bag them together to aggregate them so you don't get hammered with alerts. So let's go ahead, and I'm trying to remember now where we were. I think I've shown you the tools we have right now. Oh, also, I forgot to mention. So the site selection, we also can select, if we want to, I can just choose to only look at, I'm going to choose a tool that, I shouldn't have done this because the cherry tool is going to take a while to load, and this is one of the things where this is something that needs to be fixed on the back end, that it shouldn't be reloading this. I'm going to go to snap view, see if I can force it onto the snap view here. Well, here we go. So you can select different sites, and you can do it by going previous next, or you can select through the pull down. I want to get off of cherry cold hardiness because not all these sites even have cherries, so you won't see anything. But this is another way you can filter, is at one time you might just choose to use, let me look at this orchard or this orchard or this vineyard or whatever, and there's a pull down and there's a back and forth. So with that said, there's one more thing I was going to show you here, and that is you can look at a single site if you want. I'm going to go to all crops here, and I'm going to go this. If you check, there's a bunch of crops in a field here. These are actually, this is meant to be like a whole bunch of units, and this is meant to be one unit. So if I select this, it will go to one unit. And it's taking forever to load since I'm on Zoom, which is just not good. But in a second, this will load. And so this will show me, if I can select this, it'll show me all the tools for one unit rather than showing all the units for one tool. Whoops, that was weird. And that's telling me my internet's being maxed out because Zoom is having trouble with my green screen and background and everything too. So everything's kind of slowing up. But so this is if you want to see all the tools. And in fact, this will change a little bit. All this information that's in the snap view will be going on to the top of the mediagram here. And this thing will be going away. It's a bit redundant. But you see cherry cold hardiness. There's only a couple tools to see for this one, but in time, there'll be more tools to see. But I really want to get into the organization of how this works. So when you come in, you have to give your organization a name, whatever organization you want. Put in a URL address. We don't force any of this. Put in an address. This is up to you. I don't think we actually force you to do any of that. There's not a lot of information at the organizational level. Maybe in time that will change. Where it really comes in is actually the users. And so for right now, these are the two users in our organization. I've got myself, email address, director, and I've got permission that I'm an administrator. So I've got administrative permission. And then Kai Carter, our Wenatchee field meteorologist, is in here as a user. And you can invite other users. Clicking on this button, you can invite users. You have to have at least one administrator, and I would recommend two, just in case someone gets run over by a truck. So invite a user and click this button, and it'll pop up, and then it'll give you the opportunity to create a new user. You put in their email address and you add them to your organization. Organizational role, you can write anything you want. It's your terminology. Permission level, that's what we designate for you, either your admin or your user. And then I think we do require an email address in order to do this. And I will mention, we've noticed there's a problem, particularly with Yahoo email, that Yahoo is rejecting all of our notifications, email notifications, and communications. And we don't know why Yahoo, and hopefully in time we can, convince them that we're not spam. But for now, they seem to think that we're spam. If something happens, you can always contact us directly, and we can add you manually to the system. Or you can change your email, another option. There's also a consultant option here. So you can add a consultant. So I can invite a consultant here. And when you invite the consultant, you can tell them what units they have permission to view and see. So you can select of all these different units I have here, you can decide what they get to see, and then you invite them into your organization. You can also, if you want to, you can make a consultant an administrator of your organization. That's your choice. We're just giving you this option if you want to have. And by the way, with the users as well, I'll go in here to edit the user, but if you create a new user, the same thing. Kai, we call a field meteorologist. Again, I've given him only access to the Wine Science Center blocks. So some users don't necessarily need to see everything, and it probably makes it easier for them to not see everything. So that's how you set them up. The sites and units, the next thing to come up here. So let's start with the site, and this is going to change a little bit. So I've got two sites here. I've got IREC, I've got the Wine Science Center. This information, and this is why we're kind of changing the way we collect information. This is just default information for the site. So going forward, what's going to happen is the site's not going to have so much information in it. And this will just be that when you create a unit, then that creates a default. And the next unit you create will use the same input you had for the previous unit, and so on. So the default is just the last unit you created. And that's a little more intuitive because people get confused about why there's a cultivar at the site level. So that'll be migrated out. So don't worry too much about this stuff. Really, the site is going to be give us the latitude and longitude, give us a name. Two things we're going to need from you: latitude and longitude, and name. And then if we go to management units, this is all of the essentially blocks or however, or any kind of management unit you create will be in here. And when you go to create these, I can create a new unit. I want to create a new unit at IREC. It'll come up, and I'm going to call this, makeup. I'm just doing something. I'm going to call it, why not? Let's grow raspberries. I've never put in a raspberry unit. I hope it doesn't break it up. And maybe we'll pick a different year. Maybe that was 2008 in April. We planted some raspberries. We don't really have training systems yet for raspberries. So if there's training information stuff people want in here, we can add it. It's irrigated because that's the default for this. But this is also where I could choose find latitude and longitude. I'm going to zoom in on this. Oops. So that's Prosser City, which is not where I really want to put that. I should have put it out at IREC. Where is it here? And I could say, oh, I'm growing them right here. This is raspberries. And so you do want to be specific about the locations of these units, because later on when we're doing more clever things with the weather, that might be useful. So we can use that unit. So the latitude and longitude is slightly different. Right now we're using, the default is Prosser Northeast. I'm using that as 20% weight, Rosa 80%. I can edit that and say, really, this is mostly Rosa. So I'm going to make this like 80% this, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. 80% here, and then I'm going to go down to 20 here, and change this about. I can also put in an offset, and right now the offset is applied 24 hours. We're going to be switching this so that it's applied at night, because that's when you see the bigger temperature differences. So if you have a block that's in a sort of part of your orchard that's in a low spot that at night always runs a bit colder, you can put -2, and you can add an offset so that at night, relative to the data coming through these weather stations, you're going to be using data that's a bit colder at night. All right. I would be very cautious about doing this. Very, very cautious about doing this, because you don't want to put in some big number and then later on not realize that you're not getting the real weather station data. You're adding a big offset. So I would, and probably want to do it when you've actually collected some data in the field about this low spot and what you see at night there versus other places. So I can change this then, and then I've just created a new unit, a raspberry unit called makeup, and that's in here. I can also create a new site if I want.
We got a question. Sorry to interrupt you, Dave. We got a question.
No, that's good.
Can you describe how the weighting of weather stations works and how you'd use it in practice? I think that's a really important question.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So for a lot of you, if you only have one station nearby your orchard, you're just going to use that station, and it's going to get 100% of the weight. And you're just going to say, well, that's my best station. That best represents my orchard. I'm going to use that one station 100%. But maybe you're in a situation where you've got one station that's to the east a mile, another station that's to the west 2 miles, and your conditions at your orchard, in your opinion, are somewhat in between, right? That are approximated a little bit by both. It will actually just average the data. So it'll take the precip and it'll average the precip. It'll be a weighted average. So if it's 80% one, then 80% of the precip estimation for your orchard will come from that station that's at 80% and 20% will come from the other one. So it's a weighted average of all the station data that comes through. The other thing to keep in mind that happens is if, we're working on models that impute missing data, but in the meantime, if you've got two stations and it's 80%, 20%, if one station goes offline, the cell network goes down or whatever, it will draw data just from the other station and keep running. Now that's good and bad because you may not realize it's only drawing from one station. But that's how it's meant to work. Is there another question there as well?
Yep. Is it possible to set up sites and subsites through shape or KMZ files?
Not right now. We have talked about that. In fact, we had a lot of talks about that. Right now, we can't do that, unfortunately. What you can do, though, is for those files, if you can just give us the center point for each of those units. But that is something we have discussed. We just, at this time, we don't have the ability to manage that data. And it would take some time to build that out, that capability. Yeah. But in the future, we'd like that. Yeah, we'd very much like that capability. All right, so I don't, the site again, and again, this will change. We will not in the future, in probably even a week from now, ask you for a default site crop or a default planting date or a default training system or even the default weather. The weather and all this stuff, the weather will be set again when you set for the different microclimates. So what you're going to see is you'll see three tabs: a tab for management units, a tab for microclimates, a tab for site. And think of that as a hierarchical organization. And each management unit has to come under a microclimate, and each microclimate has to come under a site. So it'll change a little bit. We're hoping it'll be fairly intuitive, more intuitive than what we have now.
So we have another question about that weighting situation. Why the necessity of user-defined weight for weather stations? How can the user be sure the values defined are correct?
They can't, and if you don't want to do that, don't do it. That's the bottom line. Just pick a one station. We're giving folks the option. It's that simple. And so if you think about the situation with IREC, well, it makes sense. There's two weather stations at either end of the research station. It makes sense maybe to weight them. In a lot of other situations, it doesn't make sense. So what we're kind of giving people the idea, though, is that essentially in the future, we will be doing that for you. So in the future, we have data layers that we will use to interpolate, and not just from three stations, but essentially use our entire network to interpolate and make as good an estimate as we can make of what weather conditions are like in your particular location. So this framework is really just to kind of get folks thinking about where we're going. But that's, again, a really good question. Go ahead. And by the way, I'll just mention too, picking the nearest weather station, you might also have the same problem, that you might not know whether that's actually representative of your location. That's always the challenge. And that's why we're, yeah.
Sorry, this is kind of along the same lines of what you're saying right now. So does the station selection default to the nearest station based on latitude and longitude?
No, and unfortunately, so this is a bit clunky right now. So you actually should go to our AgWeatherNet site. You pick out the stations that you think are best, and there's a pull down menu. We do want to put in a map view that shows you your location and shows the nearby stations. That makes that a little more seamless in terms of picking stations, but we're trying to figure out, how long is it going to take before we have our interpolation model ready, and how much do we want to invest in this interface that's going to go away anyway once we have a way of doing this for you. So that's kind of the balance we're striking.
So I think we're going to save the next question until you start talking more about the DAS system and the decision aids.
Yep, yep. So I think we've got this basic thing laid out, how it works, how to set up your organization and so on. So the next thing I actually want to do is, and hopefully I practice this, so hopefully I can do this. I'm going to go to a new share here. I'm going to share my mobile app. Hopefully this works. I have to, here we go. I was very nervous about this thing working. Aha, here we go. And so hopefully everyone can, Ashley, can you confirm this is actually working and you can see this? And is this shared on top of the other one, or is it?
This is shared alone right now, but I can see this. It
Okay.
looks like it's probably from your iPhone.
Yes, excellent, excellent. So that's what I wanted to show. And just, there's not a lot of time left, so I'll just highlight that the one major difference for the mobile app is we also have this tile view here. So basically you can see every unit. I can select, again, a specific site. I can also do it by swiping between sites, going like this, swiping across, and you see the high, low, and current temperature and current conditions for each management unit. So it's a real quick view. And then if you want, you can click on one of these and then you go right into the site and get all the information for that site. You click on this X on the upper right to go back out of that again. And then lastly, you can go to a tool view, and this is where it pulls open. And this is sort of the view. The snap view is the one we really designed for the mobile side, that you get the information you want. And unfortunately, it's taking a little longer than I would hope, but there we are. And so there's all your sort of key information right on your phone. And this, again, will have all the information going forward as well. So since we're running out of time, I won't spend a lot more time, but hopefully it's fairly intuitive. Again, you need to set up your organization and your sites and your management units on the web first, and then they'll be available on the mobile app. And we've thought maybe a year from now, we might add a little bit of functionality for organizational functionality on the mobile, but we're trying to keep it streamlined as much as possible. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to actually go to a new share. First of all, before I move on from the mobile app, does someone have any questions about the mobile app? And I can answer those before I move on. This is available Apple and Android. And you see I can swipe, go to different sites pretty easily.
So does it show the time the data last refreshed?
Oh boy. I don't think it actually shows that. We probably should do that though. It would show it if you went in the Mediagram, but on this it probably doesn't. So I hope Sean is listening, and I'm gonna write this down actually, but we should have that up there last. And so one of the things that we don't have quite implemented, but we actually want this to work. So if you load it up and you've got all these up here, a lot of information is daily anyway. And so if you go someplace where you don't have cell connectivity, you should be able to open up the app and get what things were like the last time you opened up the app. So that if you open it up in the morning, you at least have daily values if you're out of cell connection, even if you don't have current values. I will say that there's two different kinds of current conditions are 15-minute. Almost all the plots and tools run hourly. The things where you look at them, those are hourly. But for now. Right,
so if you left this open, Dave, on the background of your iPhone, would it
would update? It
okay.
Updates automatically. Yes.
And
the website only updates if you do something, but the mobile updates automatically. And that's something we're playing around with, because we don't want to take too much data for folks too. So we, optimizing that is kind of an ongoing sort of figuring out how best to make it work. But yeah, it should update automatically. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share a few more slides. Let me go back, and this will wrap it up here. So whoops, I got to reboot this. For some reason, I can't. There we go. So there's the demo. So next steps, our big focus is on cold weather. And so what we're really focusing on right now is the whole alarm alert system. Like I said, the making the phone calls thing is turned out to be non-trivial. But we really hope to have that in January. And then blueberry cold hardiness, that's a beta version that should go up again in January pretty soon. That model looks like it's, and actually the blueberry model is probably in better shape than the cherry model. Gwen's done a really good job of systematically collecting data for that model. So that's the next steps. That's our highest priority right now. Then March 1st, this is where, and again, this is our stakeholders said, we don't want to go to 3 different websites. Give us the key things we need right at one location. So we're going to put all these things right here. And the pollen tube is largely designed, and that was really the trickiest of all these. That was a tricky one to put together. Growing degree days will be pretty straightforward and so on. And then in the spring, this is where these are models that are not used as much. So they'll be, we have to prioritize some things, and these fall a little bit lower in the priority list. And then with ET, it's just that it isn't so critical until a little bit later. So that's why ET is pushed back a little bit in terms of when that'll be available. And then, our hope really then is to step back, evaluate, get a lot of feedback, and kind of go through another cycle of how to build this out. So that's our next steps. I did want to mention our support. So this initial funding came from the Tree Fruit Research Commission. Oregon Sweet Cherry has been very supportive for what we've been doing. We got substantial support from NIOSH, which is where the heat stress app came from. And then we used a fair amount of reserves as well, internal funding. And going forward, our model, and because everyone asks about this, our model is to maintain this site on advertising. So we have permission from the university to advertise. It'll be like a Google Ads type thing. It's very restricted, no pop-ups, no porn, no politics. I mean, no advertising for anything that might be sensitive for folks. So we'll try and not bother you too much. And when we do that, we will probably offer an option, like if you don't want the advertising, you can pay us, $3 a month for every device or something like that. We really haven't thought that through, to be honest, in great detail. But we want this to be, we don't want to put it behind a paywall because we want people to be using it. That's a key goal for us. So with that, I think I'll take questions, because I think we're right at the hour mark.
So the one question I want to go back to is, will pests and disease be added to the on-farm, or will that be restricted to DAS, or might both platforms get integrated?
Well, there's ongoing discussions, but for now, DAS is within WSU, DAS is a totally separate entity. So it's up to Vince Jones to decide what DAS does. But I would hope that we could collaborate on things, but you have to collaborate in a way that everyone's sort of made whole financially and there's enough money to keep everything going, and that's not trivial in our current situation. So, yeah.
Are the models developed by ON directly, or are there collaborations with other researchers at WSU or other universities?
They're all developed, but through collaborations. Yeah. All developed through collaborations and public models. And so our focus really for AgWeatherNet is weather. We think there's an opportunity to provide higher quality weather data, higher quality forecasts. We're working on some nowcasting tools for frost, all kinds of things of that nature. That's really our focus. And then we want to collaborate with other people who have expertise in horticulture or entomology or plant pathology or whatever it is.
Is there an artificial intelligence component of the application presently?
No, there is not. It depends on how you define. Well, I say now, no. I would say that very soon there will be some of the forecast data that are feeding into it will come out of a machine learning model. So if you can, I mean, it depends on how you define artificial intelligence. So yes, there's some machine learning going on behind the scenes that will feed into the weather side of this. But in terms of the decision making, no. Like I said, we had a big $20 million proposal went in a few weeks ago that was for that exact focus, was all about bringing artificial intelligence into the decision making part of the process. Yeah. But that's something that's, before it's available, is 3-4 years down the road. Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't look like there are any other questions coming in. We are at 11:02. I want to thank everybody for joining us.
I want to thank you all too for coming and
if people have questions, they just look you up on WSU's website and send you an email.
Yeah, and so yeah, dave.brown@wsu.edu. You can send me an email directly there, or you can send, if it's more like where do I put a station or that kind of question, I would send it to weather@wsu.edu. We check those every single day, multiple times a day, and that will get routed to a meteorologist who probably respond quicker than me. And I might lose your email, they won't, and so that's a better way to go for some of those things. But I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us here today.
There's 2 questions. I don't know if we want to.
Oh,
turn over.
Yeah. Does every individual site need a Wi-Fi connection?
Every individual site needs a connection. Most of these connect through cell. So the Davis station has the option to connect either through a Wi-Fi or through. They have a Wi-Fi module for connectivity, and they have a cell option as well. For the meter stations, they have to have a cell connectivity. And again, that's something we can talk to you about if in terms of what networks are available and that kind of thing.
Okay, and the other question was just thanking us for the informative webinar. So it looks like we're done. And you're the host, Dave. So I don't know if you want to transfer the host stuff.
All right.
To me.
Like I know how to. I will do that. I will. I'm going to stop sharing, and I will. I don't know how to. I'm just going to leave and assign you. Okay.
Okay, that works. Thanks, Dave.